Thanks. Thanks. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Let me get the technology working here. Okay, so I'm a longtime amateur astronomer, so a lot of the early stuff we're going to talk about here is background on being an amateur astronomer and how it crept into my art making process. And then you'll see how maps sort of fall into it. Halfway through, there's some large-scale mapping things that I did. And then towards the end, we'll touch on these panoramic drawings I'm doing now that are definitely related to this area, totally influenced by this area. Let's see. So let's start out. That's me. I grew up in San Rafael, up in Northern California, and got into astronomy when I was about 12. I'm actually 15 or so there. And that was a go-to telescope for amateur astronomers at that time. I saved up, and it was called a Criterion Dynascope RV6. And they're like collector's items now. So that's like 1974, maybe, something like that. And early influences when I started out with astronomy are the Golden Guides. Are you familiar with those? They have them on rocks and minerals, weather, different subjects, but that was heavily influential. And then Pictorial Astronomy is a really great book, and the Larousse Encyclopedia of Astronomy. So those were early influences. Later on, after art school and living in an urban area for a long time, we were caretaking this dilapidated ranch house in Latigo Canyon. We were there for 16 years until it burned down and everything was vaporized in a wildfire. But that's the same scope I used when I was much younger. I loaned it to a responsible friend who kept it for me while I was going to college and all that. And then on that property, it was 130 acres overlooking Latigo Point and the whole Santa Monica Bay and Point Dume. It was a pretty amazing situation. And there was plenty of room, so I decided to build an observatory. And at that time, I was going up to Mount Pinus up here quite a bit, where a lot of amateur astronomers go. And I met this guy that made, kind of handcrafted scopes and got him to make me a 10-inch f8 Newtonian telescope there. And I built that building and had a roll-off tarp roof that was cantilevered over like a beam that would move, and then tubes like a plastic pipe that would sort of torque up. And that thing survived really strong Santa Ana winds. And it burnt, the first iteration of it burned down in one of the wildfires. There were 6 while we lived there. And then this iteration of it burned down in 2007. So lost all the equipment. Then we moved to Northern California for a while after that. But you can see the setting. That's Point Dume in the background there. Just spectacular and really good. Pretty dark, dark out over the ocean, away from LA and the valley behind the mountains there. And there's a map that I made in a large book. I call the observatory the Solstice Peak Observatory. And so this is a map of like the house, the observatory, the studio, where the rattlesnakes hang out, the volcanic basalt, the trees we climbed in Santa Ana winds like idiots. We had a fun time there. It was really great. And at that time, I was doing these large scale surf drawings with 40,000 cells, and I was filling them in with stick figure surfing, and that sort of got some attention in the art world, and I had a show in London, and right around that time I was doing these more astronomically related, but not observational yet. These were just sort of taxonomies of different types of galaxies, for instance. There's a big one. And that led me to start doing these giant observational atlas books that I had professional bookbinders make. And then I would translate my observations from the observatory into these books. And I considered it my more mature work than the surf work. And I sort of played it that way. But the reason I did these big atlases is I did have a show in London in 1993 of the surf-related work. And at the British Museum, they have these giant bookcases with these huge atlases. And that was heavily influential, making me think, well, that'd be an interesting way to make these big sculptural books and kind of take drawing, a step further. And by the way, everything I do it's an archival ballpoint pen. And so it's all ballpoint pen. So those are two field of view drawings in a big fold out book there. And here's some spreads from it. And it's in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, that one. So you have sort of, the familiar sort of tracking stations that you see up and down the California coast, from Mavericks, from Half Moon Bay, Magoo over here. And then that's the sort of sorrowful bent eucalyptus tree for kind of a view from the observatory, looking towards the city, light pollution, kind of a backdrop. So these are early versions of these panoramic things I'm doing now, sort of oddly enough, 25 years later. And then there's some of the books, again, they were really interesting because they were like sculptural. And we kept it kind of proletariat with sawhorse legs and some nice plywood. And then those are field of view drawings up there, because when you look through a telescope, everything you see is circular, like you're looking through an eyepiece. And so I thought it was natural to do these kind of large drawings of that nature. And I threw this in because it's like, if you grew up in the 50s and 60s and early 70s, Apollo missions were going on, and National Geographic had this map, which is, I think a lot of young people had those pinned up in their rooms, along with their Fillmore and Avalon posters, all that. At least I did. And here's a lunar atlas. This is a smaller one called Night Trips. And so I use text in my work. This is sort of a description of just observing the moon, and then I write down the vibe of that evening, if you will, because I'm not really a writer. So it's more of a asset to the drawing. There's the drawing related to that text. This is a map of sorts. It's called a numerical intensity estimate. And I was a member of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, and actually took a course and was certified to be a Saturn observer, which I did for several years until I got really busy and didn't really have as much time to do that. But it's numerical, so from 0 being really dark to 10 being really light. And there's a drawing eyepiece drawing that I translated into a book of Clavius, made famous in 2001, the crater on the moon. And then I love the 19th century astronomers, kind of right when photography was just coming in. People were still doing a lot of drawing at the eyepiece of the telescopes. And this is Julius Schmidt at the Athens Observatory, was doing these incredible drawings of the moon. And there were a lot of selenographers that were creating it was like their life's work to map the moon visually. And here's a book that's specifically for lunar and planetary observing, which is kind of a specialized aspect of astronomy versus just your general looking at stars and star clusters, etc. And this is dated now, but I still refer to it. As you'll see, I'm a bit of a Luddite. I don't do astrophotography. I don't use CCD cameras. I like visual observing. And then here's a book that I made of Jupiter's belts. If you on a winter night, like right now, if you watch, actually back I think in November, you could have watched Jupiter rise as the sun set at opposition, and you could have watched it all night long and seen a complete rotation of the planet. So it's the largest planet in our solar system, but it rotates really fast. And so I did a glorified strip sketch book of it. It was 189 pages, actually. It weighs about 50 pounds. It's another ridiculous book. And NASA approached me for their art program. They commissioned me to do some Mars drawings. And they said, what do you need? And I said, well, I'd really like to use a 60-inch on Mount Wilson. So off I went, and there we are. I took some friends with me, and it was quite an evening. And here's some, again, I love these older drawings of Mars. These are actually photos on my side here, and those are all drawings on the other side. And it's a tough planet to observe. It's pretty bright right now, as a matter of fact, in Gemini. It's right pretty much in the northeast up high, right at sunset. And then I used text and did this drawing, which was a rather small drawing. It's maybe 2 feet square. And then I did this drawing because I went to JPL during that project. And they gave me all this Mars Surveyor stuff to play with. So I did sort of a mosaic drawing of the different features. And that's actually quite large, 40 by 60 inches, something like that. And then there's the field of view drawing I was talking about. So that's a globular star cluster. I think might be M22 in Sagittarius. That's the Owl Nebula in Ursa Major, near the Big Dipper. In fact, it's in the cup of the Dipper. It's actually very faint, but if you use certain filters, you can eke out detail. And it looks like an owl because it's got the 2 big eyes kind of staring at you. And there's a comet, and there's text in the landscape again. So I started doing a lot of that, which you'll see later with the panoramic drawings. And another globular. They're just really fun to observe and draw because you can sort of make stuff up as you go along. It's like, an astrophotographer would try to get a legit, accurate shot. But as a visual observer, a lot's left up to your imagination, even when you're looking at it through the eyepiece. And everybody differs a little bit, too, how they perceive things. And then from the circular drawings, it seemed like a natural thing to try to make them three-dimensional. So I approached my bookbinder and kind of talked to him about it, and we figured out there's ways I can make fiberglass spheres in halves and then bond them together. And then the bookbinder would coat them at his place, and they'd be delivered to me blank like that, ready to go. So, and generally these really big ones I'd roll around on the floor as I was working. And there's an example of what they look like. And they're suspended about the height of how you would hang a drawing, about 54 to 56. Some people do 58 inches. So on the equator of the globe, they're hung that way. That's a 36-inch diameter one, a part of a supernova remnant in Cygnus called the Veil Nebula. It's kind of these filamentary, beautiful, wispy, leftover gas from the explosion floating through the galaxy. There's one of an early Milky Way one. That's the first one I did. And then a big globular cluster. So those were naturally, the first one I did was a globular cluster on a globe, go figure. So it made sense. And there's a meteor shower with an account in the landscape. And I started realizing that using text in the landscape like that also kind of relates to mapping geological forms, strata. So that was sort of an element of the globes. There's a beautiful open cluster called Messier 11. And there's a piece of Wonder Bread. That's actually the Dumbbell Nebula in the constellation Vulpecula, which it doesn't exactly look like that. I always thought that was my homage to like Andy Warhol or something. And then, so I started using a wee bit of color in the early 2000s. And for 10 years, I just used black and white, just black ballpoint pen. And some blue with the surfing work. But this is in the transverse range. It's actually the Kiama Badlands out there. I used to go up there with a friend, and it sort of talks about camping and the beauty of the sky, and also the spent cartridges and beer cans all over the campground. It's like, so it's sort of a, I sort of have a irksome environmental aspect to some of my writing. And this is another good example of the text is strata, and this is all found language from real estate magazines that I used to collect in Malibu. And this was right before the big crash, so it was like 2005 or something. And they were going over the top. Yeah, so exclusive gated enclave, enormous walk-in closet. Let's see, perfect celebrity hideaway. Honey, stop the car, it's perfect. And then the installations of these were really, would adapt well to like different environments. And that's in Vancouver at the Vancouver Art Gallery. That's one of my favorite installations. And there's some biggies at Shoshana Wayne Gallery. Those are 6 feet in diameter, those globes. And the one in the foreground with the trees, that's Domeland Wilderness up in the Southern Sierra. And then the other one's actually M11 and that star cluster we looked at earlier. And those they take time, so they're huge. And then this is another fave installation at the Mattress Factory in Pittsburgh, which is a space that has people come and do installations. And it's an old factory. And we decided to use the basement for the globes. And it really is cool because that's really old stone walls. And it took like 38 lights to even illuminate the spheres. Beautiful quality to it. And then that's the atrium at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. They commissioned the Department of State art program, commissioned me to do some work for that. And I was worried about the light, and they said, don't worry about it, it's bomb-proof glass. No UV radiation gets through it. Okay, so now we're at, that's a classic star atlas. It's actually a collector's item now. And it's, I've had it since I was like 14 or so. And I still refer to it. It folds out. And the Milky Way is color-coded. And different, nebulae. The gaseous things are kind of green, and then the star clusters are yellow. The galaxies, that's the Andromeda galaxy there, our closest neighbor, in red. And they just have this quality that's hard to describe. And so I decided here's a few more that I use. Actually, I brought one just to show you, like that. And, they have really nice charts in them. So, you can go through and you can check off things you observed, and they're real handy. These days, most people hold their phone up, and that does the job. But I always found learning this stuff slowly over a period of time gave me more sort of ability in a way, because somebody can punch in a number into a telescope and it'll just automatically go to something and they'll go, wow, I see, the globular cluster in Hercules, M13. And then they move to another object. I go, where is that? And I actually did this with somebody once. They go, I don't know, it's up there somewhere. So that, they don't learn the sky, and it takes time. And a professional astronomy, well, I'll show you in a minute, but I decided to take those symbols and record all my favorite objects in the Northern Hemisphere that I observed and make it into a field guide. So basically, this is a gigantic book that rolls up, goes in that tube, and the table folds up, and off you go. But, it's a ridiculous idea, but that's sort of postmodernism for you. So this book here's just a quick look at how it moves, how you roll the pages back. That's one of the bookbinders helping me do that. I used architectural film overlays. I found a place in the Midwest that had overstock of these somebody ordered too many giant rolls, and so they were happy to get rid of them, so it came in handy for the book. And as you can see, when you peel away one layer, you have another layer with information on it, and that's the transparent architectural film. And that inked in part, the black part there, was a 5 by 10 foot drawing that took 48 gel pens to do that. And that's the one that wrecked my shoulder. In fact, I got tendonitis from that. So this is mapping, celestial mapping. There's no coordinates really, but things are sort of where they belong. But that's because it's art. It's not, technical. So, and then there's the little symbols, and then as you see, when you peel it back, the symbols are just these abstract things. There's no reference. And there's sort of a guide. The supernova remnant they look like, chili peppers. Something that Steve Sprinkle would come up with. And then there's star chains, star clouds, globular clusters, open galactic clusters, just on and on and on. So I had fun making that. And then I made another one for another show and moved up from canvas cover to the ripstop nylon. So it was more sporty. And so basically they're just big sculptures, They're drawings and they're books and they're semi-utilitarian, but they're really sculptures. They just turned that first page. This one I had 6 pages in it, and it went all the way to the center of our galaxy, which is a recurring theme. As you'll see, it'll come up soon. And I also was bouldering at the time. I was young enough to do that without breaking things, and was going up in the Los Padres a lot. And this is one of the bouldering books that's like 24 by 24 inches, something like that. And then, you can take your lunch, sit by a boulder, contemplate it, figure out a route, and then do it and name it, and it's sort of your thing. Great way to spend an afternoon. That's in the Sespe Gorge, actually. that one. And again, I use the architectural film so you can peel away the information, and then all of a sudden you end up with a total abstraction. And abstract art is something I just can't do. I can't face a blank canvas like a lot of people and just make something. I really have to have a launching off point, something that I'm interested in, that I can adapt. But that's mapping as well, and I love these bouldering guides. I go by Real Cheap Sports and pick up, Guide to Joshua Tree, Guide to Bishop. There's actually a local one for all the boulders around this area. And then here's the books and globes in a show. I was invited to be in the inaugural show of the Turner Contemporary, the last public space they built in England with public funds in 2011. And the architect was David Chipperfield. And so there's I think that was the Sophisto opening, and then there was the public opening. There were 7,000 people at the opening of this thing. And they'd let 800 in at a time or something. It was outrageous. And they commissioned me to do a drawing. I did a walk along the coast there and just made notes and drawings, and there's white cliffs all over the place. So that was what I came up with. And then here's another way the globes function. That's a winery up in St. Helena, Hall Wines. And that's where they used to crush the grapes, and there's a rail there's like a drain sort of thing going down the middle of the building, and it would pour into these giant cisterns down below. Quite a nice space, really amazing space. And then that's a globe I'm working on now, and I'm also doing I'm still doing field of view drawings. I'm kind of a three-trick pony, maybe, I like the field of view drawings, I like the globes, I like the panoramas. It's kind of what I'm working on. In 2014, I was invited to go up to UC Santa Cruz, a theoretical astrophysics task, so they call it, and the Lick Observatory with the Institute of Arts and Sciences there. And so it was a 2-year residency, and I'd go back and forth. So I was able to go to the Lick Observatory. There I am standing by the dome, and there's the great refracting telescope. I was able to observe with that, and it's like a 16-ton piece of metal. It's a little intimidating being up on top of the ladder, peering out in the dark, and there's this massive thing there. I've got a flashlight in my mouth, and I'm trying to draw something. But it was really a great experience. The floor usually raises and lowers, but it was broken. So, so normally you could just stand there comfortably or even sit. But nope, 20-foot ladders. And there it is. It's just an amazing place. It's very Jules Verne. A shipbuilder named Captain Floyd built the dome and everything. In 1890, this had first light. That's the first time you can view through a telescope. They call it first light. 1892, somewhere around there. Yeah. It was the largest telescope in the world for a bit. And then here's the 120-inch dome there. And I got to sit in with an astronomer in the control room. Like, you don't sit in the dome on this one. You're in a control room, and the astronomer was looking for, was actually mapping high-velocity stars that have somehow been knocked out of they're shooting out of our galaxy at high speeds. And actually, he was an art collector, and he owned some of my work, so that helped too. So I was able to sit in. And then we did one computerized night on a 40-inch telescope. That's Paul Lynham, one of the staff astronomers up there. And so we were doing, computerized images with a CCD camera. That's a globular cluster that's way out. Globular clusters orbit around the bulge in our galaxy, sort of on the outskirts. This one's 120,000 light years out, quite a ways. And there's the Saturn Nebula, which doesn't, I've seen it better with my eyes through my own scopes. And then I went back up a month later and was able to, they took off all the equipment so I could use it visually, the 40-inch telescope. And then here's notes, things I wanted to look at with the nickel. They call it the nickel telescope. And then there's some of my just normal notes from just observing. There's a drawing of Jupiter at the bottom and different magnifications, so I know what I'm doing. And then they have archives at the Lick, and that's Tony Mish, who you'll hear more about later. He's the archivist. He was a staff astronomer there for 20 years, and he's retired. There's 3,000 logbooks up there dating back to the late 19th century. And I was able to actually, look at some of these things that I read about in a lot of the historical books. Like R.J. Trumpler, this character was famous for discovering star clusters in our own galaxy, but he was also doing atmospheric studies of Mars. So these are equations trying to determine atmospheric pressures. And this is in the 1930s. Beautiful drawings, though. As as visual artists, I was drooling over these things like, wow, that's, if I could do that on a blank canvas out of my head, that would be something. Ain't gonna happen. And then this is a very famous drawing of Mars. There was an astronomer there named Edward Emerson Barnard, and they called him the eagle-eyed astronomer, and he discovered Jupiter's fifth moon visually. And his drawings of Mars and his observations with their telescope at the Lick disproved the idea of canals on Mars, which Percival Lowell and Flagstaff was pushing at the time, that there was a civilization there, the ice caps melt and the canals fill with water, and the thirsty residents can grow things, and Barnard saw it so well because the seeing conditions there at the Lick Observatory can be phenomenal. And through, so he kind of disproved that. And they let me use this little telescope here in my own little dome while I was up there. And it's a 22-inch old beat up Cassegrain telescope. So that was fun to be able to actually, go up and be a little intimidating actually, being in the dome and moving the dome and, the whole bit. And then out of all that, talking to all these astrophysicists on campus and being up on the mountain, all of the astrophysicists were interesting, right? I mean, studying ripples through the galaxy, or somebody else studying coming up with cosmological theories and cosmic web diagrams and stuff like that. I'm like, how do I combine all this stuff? And one of the astronomers there said, well, check this out. This is the history of everything. So it's like the present day galaxy, Earth, galaxy, what we're living in now, all the way back to the Big Bang. And then there's the cosmic dark ages, and then reionization started happening, and stars started forming, and galaxies. And now with the Webb telescope, we're finding out they're happening a lot quicker, earlier than we thought. So decided to work with this because the culmination of this residency was at the Institute of Contemporary Art in San Jose, a really great space. So my wife, Laura, is a graphic designer, and she made this map of like a guide to the installation. So this is kind of off base from what I normally do. And at the time I was experimenting with bioresin and collaging and stuff like that, which kind of turned into a big mess. So I went back to what I do best, that's drawing. But this project benefited from that. So that's actually the installation. So we used sheer fabrics, and I did all these little drawings, and she sewed everything, Laura. She collaborated with me on this. And you walk through this. So you start, this is all like in the front, you're in now time. And as you go back, you're sort of going back in time. There's a black hole, I had to put one of those in. And spectra behind it, we had to put that in because that's fundamental to understanding light. There's details of stuff in our galaxy in the current time. There's some current galaxies. And it was all kind of zany and funky, which is a nice departure. I'm generally more orderly than that in my work, but it turned out to be quite amazing to walk through and experience. There's exoplanets. I made little asteroids to hang by the spectra going across. And I asked one astronomer there, I said, well, what did the earliest galaxies look like? He said, blue blobs. And I said, okay, I'll make blue blobs. So I went to Fiberglass Hawaii in Ventura and got some foam they were throwing out and carved them up. And so they're like biomorphic forms. And then one of my favorite panels is this one, which is just the cosmic web. And, you know, if you look at maps of the universe, how they've mapped it out, it's just webbing. It's incredible. You know, huge galaxy clusters, and then they're sort of connected to another one, and then there's some empty space. And they're trying to figure out what that empty space is. Dark energy, dark matter, they're not sure. And we made these planetary nebulae is when stars die. So we made a bunch of these, like three-dimensional things, sort of whimsical, a little like, they're decorative, you know. And then there we are. We rehung the whole thing down at Orange Coast College. They had a astronomy show there. And there's the Kelpie dogs. And then this is at the ICA. So we showed some of my regular astronomy work, and then we showed Tony Mish, the archivist. I said, Tony, why don't you bring some stuff down and put it in the show, you know, because people aren't aware of what's up there on the mountain and in the archives. I mean, there's some stuff at the UC Santa Cruz, the research library, but it's just incredible what they have. And so he painstakingly put together this beautiful installation in one part of the ICA. And then on the other side, we had the installation, the one you walk through, and then my regular kind of astronomy work. And now we're getting here, we're coming back down to Earth from that. And this is what I'm working on now. So that's Piedra Blanca there. So I use these topo maps a lot, you know, when we're hiking or just researching the area. And go up there, and I make some notes and decided to make a piece with the full moon. And there's my written material there. And then I'm translating it onto the piece. And that's on museum board, which is it's like a 5-ply Bristol paper. And I'm using gouache and color pencil, of all things. And because actually Laura said, why don't you, we've got all these colored pencils. Why don't you use some colored pencils? And I'm like, no, forget it. I use ink. And then I tried it. And then I started seeing how, yeah, this could work. So there's positioning the text around the moon, with some, just on glassine or some transparent material. Oh, I didn't know that was a video. Yikes. Um, so there's drawing in the moon, and then there's the text. So I don't expect you to read it, but up there it's about scrambling around. It's about the beauty of the area. It's about the beauty of the things on the moon. And then it ends, the very end of it is, it says a pale blue dot, a pale blue dot, a pale blue dot, reference to Carl Sagan's famous comment about how small we are in the scope of things. That shot looking back from Saturn of Earth, which is minute, barely visible. And then here it is in the gallery in San Francisco, Hausfeld Gallery. And then I started using a lot of text in the sort of along the horizon line in the sky. That's a Mars drawing. That's actually a real drawing I did of Mars, transcribed pretty well on there. And that's Peter Blanca again. And I've done a lot of found language stuff where, I've found a lot of UFO. I wanted to do a piece of Joshua Tree with the Milky Way and like that. It's called High Desert, High Strangeness. And taking text from old Art Bell radio shows, which are archived on the internet, so I could listen to them and pick out tasty things like the Greys collect the samples, or, clamp down at Nellis, like Nellis Air Force Base, Area 51 stuff. That's all in the Milky Way. And it's the first time I've introduced text into the Milky Way, so I thought it was kind of neat. That's 32 by 120 inches. And then there's looking west from Miners Oaks, or pretty much anywhere, looking towards the San Ynez over here. And I use that a lot, those mountains there. Just see them all the time. And I did another large Milky Way one here. And the text it just says over and over, here we are in the galactic suburbs, and then I'd insert something like, SETI hasn't received a signal yet. Here we are in the galactic suburbs. Some other reference to something in astronomy. So, and there's your conjunction that happened a couple of years back of Saturn and Jupiter. That was what they looked like through the eyepiece of the telescope. And that's just a typical Central California setting kind of thing, with a lone oak tree sitting there. And then, Dry Canyon. Okay, so this is back behind Ray's Peak, and things dry out real quick back there. No, wait a minute, that's not Dry Canyon, that's Lizard's Mouth. Sorry, I can't quite read it from here. Yeah, that's Lizard's Mouth. So it's an area of boulders right over Goleta, like a couple thousand feet above Goleta. And as you're bouldering, you're looking down at the Channel Islands and everything. It's really amazing. So that figures in a lot of stuff I've been doing lately. And again, there's text in the text with the full moon kind of anchoring the drawing, and then the boulders spread out. And that's 16 by 80 inches. And okay, here we are, Dry Canyon. So that's, if you go past Ray's Peak all the way down to Lockwood Valley Road and then go east, you'll come up with Dry Canyon there. And there's a place called Dome Springs up there. That earlier globe I showed of the Keoma Badlands, that was a reference to Dome Springs back in 2000 or something when I went up there. But we went up there a few years back, and there was like police tape, like yellow tape, like don't go beyond here. And we're like, there's nobody around. Let's go in, So we went back in there, and I did this drawing. It's called An Astronomy of Dreams, which I borrowed from J.G. Ballard. So basically, there are these weird pyramidal pink cliffs there, really beautiful. And then like pinyon pines and juniper, real different environment than like the top of Ray's Peak. So most of the water is caught up there. And so this is very arid and dry. Later we found out that the reason it was closed is there's unexploded ordnance up there. I guess maybe from World War II or something. So we were lucky and didn't get a whatever $1,000 fine for going in there. But we have no record of actually being there, except this. So yeah, so this talks about roaming around and then observing in the evening, and then as our astronomy of dreams goes into the void of sleep. That's how it ends. You know, and I gripe about light pollution and overdevelopment and all that kind of stuff in my work too, in the writing. And actually, in this writing, it's sort of, you know, splatter paintings like Jackson Pollock or Damien Hirst has been doing some lately. The text is sort of my version of a splatter painting because it's me like emoting, letting it all hang out. Anyway, so that's one of my favorite drawings. It's up at 5. And I think that's, oh, yeah. Then there's a show, the Astronomy of Dreams, I had a year ago or so up there in San Francisco. And that piece behind me there is 160 inches long by 40 inches high. And it's a place we lived after the Malibu place burned down, a place we were caretaking for a long time. And we got stuck up there in Lake County. But we had like a walnut orchard and apple trees and stuff like that. It was really, you know, beautiful area, but nobody will come and visit. And so it was a real career dampener, so to speak. And then we thought, we've got to get back down there. Where do we, you know, we loved Ojai, and we started looking around. And luckily snuck into a place in Miners Oaks in 2009. So got out of there, got rid of that place. But it was an interesting experience because there's all the lingo people were using. You know, you'd be in line at the market and they'd go, "Is Kenny out of jail yet?" You know, or "Has anybody got any oxy?" You know, that kind of stuff. It was pretty funky. And people were buying huge bags of frozen fish sticks and like giant soft drinks. And it was out there. Really beautiful, no hiking trails. Like the Mendocino National Forest, no hiking trails. And if you go off trail, you could get trapped, get stuck in a trap because of all the growers. So when we moved down here, it was mind-blowing, all the trails, and you'd bump into people on the trail, and all of a sudden you're talking about Philip Guston or something. And that was just like, you know, it was like two completely different worlds. And oddly enough, you can go from Calistoga to Middletown, and you're going from like New York City to Appalachia. You know, it's that drastic. It's really incredible. And it was a great experience, really nice people actually up there. Our barefoot neighbor, Bart, you know, but never wore shoes. But so it was a cool experience. But my wife, Laura, was like, "You're not putting me out to pasture." Like, you know, because I kind of liked it because the sky was really dark, you know, but sorry. I mean, Ojai's got decently dark skies. It's a bit light polluted, but, you know, hey, you know, we felt like moving to Miners Oaks was like moving to, you know, the Village in New York or something. We're like, really? Wow. You know? It's like, huh?
Sesame Street.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, you know, it was a bit Aussie and Harriet, but at the same time, there's very sophisticated, educated people here. You know, which is very nice. So that made a real beautiful installation, and it was sort of, I realized that the panoramas are a way of stretching the horizon of the globes out and giving me room to kind of stretch out with the writing and other aspects. That one's actually it's called 400 million miles from Tranquilon Mountain, which is on Vandenberg Air Force Base, or which is now Space Force Base, unfortunately. And you can see it from Halama. So I did this thing from like the San Rafael Mountains down. I wonder if I have that map in here. No, I don't. Okay. No, but I spent a lot of time in the San Rafael wilderness too, back behind San Ynez. So anyway, it just says that over and over and over again, that Jupiter's 400 million miles away, and we won't be able to see it if they keep putting junk in orbit. That's how I look at it. And then there's the new dog there. And we do stargazing nights, and Cassandra back there, we went to her closing party at Taft Gardens, and she's like, "Have you guys been up to the mesa up there? It'd be a great place to stargaze." And so we went up there, and we were like, "Whoa, this is amazing!" And so we started doing astronomy nights there, and it's sort of, it's loosely part of the art and nature program there that they have at Taft, and which is really great. It's incredible. And Cassandra, right back there, started the whole thing. So thanks for that, Cassandra. That was an amazing thing to do. So there it is. That's Taft Gardens, and I actually can show you the exact spot on that topo map, the relief map over there. So we do this stargazing with, it's kind of, talk about Ozzie and Harriet, stargazing with Russell and Laura. But so we're the nerds that do observing nights up there. It's very rudimentary astronomy at the beginning, like a talk. And it's an incredible environment. The views are just stunning as the sun sets, and I'll do this real basic astronomy stuff, and then as it gets darker, then we'll start observing. And there's some people, you probably recognize the woman in the middle there, really good artist, Lynn Hansen. And then there's the telescopes. So we had the biggest one's that 12.5-inch one that actually the astronomer, the archivist at the Lick Observatory gave that to me. Because he said, "I just can't lug it around anymore. I don't use it. Do you want it?" So we took it and sort of fixed it up a little bit, and it works great. Then we have a computerized scope. So Laura can, she'll say, "What do we look at next?" I'll say, NGC 5719 or whatever. She'll punch that in and it'll go, because she's a little more computer savvy than I am. And then the other one's just a classic Newtonian, 8-inch Newtonian telescope. So we have 3 scopes. We have binoculars, I've got a laser pointer, and if it's a good dark night, I can use the laser pointer. And there's some people rejoicing, and that's an incredible photograph by Alexandra Nicklin with her new phone. I mean, that's from a phone. That's just insane. Look at the stars. I mean, so that's what it's like. And people really it's an enjoyable evening. And it's really just nice to connect with faraway things like, ancient light into your own eye. And, astrophotographers, there's millions of them out there, and they all do beautiful stuff, but there's nothing that replaces, your eye and how you perceive the thing in space, whatever we're looking at. So anyway, so that's sort of how you use maps in relation to stars, and then the topo maps in relation to where we're located here, or the bouldering maps for, when I used to be more hardcore about bouldering. And I've also done surf map books where I've mapped surf spots up and down the coast that I like. Um, so that's how I use maps. And the globe in this show is actually looking up Matilla Canyon and you can see Old Man Mountain kind of poking up back there. Uh, Not quite back by Old Man Canyon, but farther down, looking up at it. And then in the sky, I put some autumn constellations, Auriga, Triangulum, which has a big, big galaxy in it, and then Andromeda, which has a naked eye, a galaxy you can actually see with your own eyes. And then, so, I got a little colorful there in the landscape. But anyway, so anybody have any questions? Yeah.
So the comment you made, nothing replaces your eye and how you perceive the objects in the sky. You mean like your direct experience of them and relationships? Can you say a little more about that?
Well, for instance, if you're looking at the Andromeda galaxy, which I showed earlier on that star chart, the fold-out star chart, that's 2.3 million light years away. And you can see it with your naked eye from a dark location. You can see it at Taft if it's a good dark night. But you look at it through a telescope and you can actually see, if the telescope's big enough, you can start detecting light and dark areas in it. And that's, if we looked at Jupiter, you would see it differently than I would see it. We all perceive color differently and slightly, and scale, all kinds of things. But that's what makes it magical. Whereas a camera, you can just set everything and it's going to do what it does. But if we all sat down and drew Jupiter tonight through a telescope, they'd all look different, and that's sort of the magic of it. And it also varies from night to night. Some nights the seeing's not so good. Some nights the seeing's perfect. And one night you'll look at Mars and it'll just be kind of a ruddy blob. And then you'll have a very steady night and it'll be absolutely stunning, where you see the polar caps and some of the surface markings of an actual terrestrial planet, which is 38 million miles away. So, and it's the scale of things too. Like I always talk about that at the star gatherings, how important scale is. But anyway, anybody else? Yeah.
You have such an incredible skill with astronomy, and you have such an incredible vision as an artist. And these are two things that don't normally go together. How do you think the relationship between those two parts of yourself or your brain? Do you think of them as the same thing? Are they in conflict with each other?
No. No. Mm-mm. No. The only conflict might arise in my writing, because of course, I'm referencing J.G. Ballard or, real estate magazines or old, UFO radio shows or UFO magazine material, stuff like that. So that's the odd thing that takes me a while to put together. The rest of it just kind of fits because I'm so interested in both things, so interested in one thing that it makes me want to manifest it in something else, put it that way. And it's I've been doing that for a long time now, and never get bored with it, And one more thing I wanted to touch on, in terms of astronomy, astronomers, Tony at the Lick Observatory was telling me that there's people that'll work on something for 20 years or 30 years or more, and then it'll be disproven like, a theory, and there, or, and there's this clash between the observers, the people that run the telescopes and actually do the telescopic observations, and the theorists. So, it's like this weird world up there. But, Tony's, what he was trying to say is that it just takes time. It's like not a quick thing. Like we could all go to the astronomy picture of the day online and look at some amazing thing by the Webb or the Hubble, space telescopes. But the astronomers that are actually doing the research it's plodding, and it takes years and years, and then there's no guarantees you're right. So yeah, and he was saying this perception that it's all whiz bang, like you look through the telescope or take a picture and you're done, that's it, we figured it out. No. So I thought that was fascinating because my work is very plodding, and I'm occasionally Laura will kind of push me, like try colored pencil, and I'm like, colored pencil, no, and then I'll see how it works, and maybe it'll work, and then you realize over time, but as a lot of you artists in the audience know, nothing comes instantly. It's just, it all takes so much time. And the same with learning the sky. We do those public star nights at Taft, but we also do some at like the Ojai Valley Inn. And we're not able to disclose who we do that for, but so we go there, and some of these people will walk up with their phones and go, "Oh, I can see what you're looking at," and like rattle off some information. And I'm showing the person this through a telescope, and I found it in the sky myself, but it's like, no. So I think technology just kind of can make it in one eye and out the other, basically, So that's my take. I'm a bit of a Luddite, like I said. So yeah, Hillary.
Hey, Russ, do the astronomers, the astrophysicists, and the cosmologists that you interact with, have they seen this work? Do you have a chance to?
Yeah, the one that was observing with a 120-inch telescope when I was up there was named Michael Rich. He's a research astrophysicist at UCLA, and he and his wife are big art collectors. And when I was up there in the control room with him, I mean, he's on the spectrum, you know what I mean? He's like, "Hey, Russ, can you go down to the fridge and get me a Coke Zero?" And like, "Sure, Michael," and he's like, "Oh, we had to sell off our collection except for you and Timothy Hawkins. We're hanging on to those." So, and he's like, basically sits in his office, and believe me, the idea of the scientist's office with papers just falling everywhere, that's his office. I mean, it's crazy. But he, while we were observing, he discovered a quadruple star system that had never been mapped, ever been found. He's like, "I'm going to write a paper for the Astronomical Union," So it was pretty trippy, but yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, Wendy.
Can you talk a little bit about the text that you have on the bottom? And you do it like by section, or you roll this around and?
With the smaller globes like that one, I just have a sonotube, like a cut piece of sonotube with some padding on it, and I just sort of adjust it as I go along. With the really big ones, like I'm working on now, I roll it on the floor over packing blankets with glassine over them.
Are you doing like one section at a time, or like one row of?
Once I have it mapped out, then it's basically like a coloring book. You fill in and adapt as you're going along.
And how do you decide what you're writing about?
Well, the writing, that's a globe that I made over, and it was a real estate globe that was called Watch the Dolphins Play. And it was from the real estate magazines in the past that I used to use. I don't use them anymore. I'm more interested in sort of the UFO thing and the fascination with phenomenon, that kind of stuff. So I might be introducing more of that into the text. We'll see. We'll see, maybe not. I'm not sure yet. I'm not quite settled with it. But, in our culture, there's this huge fascination with that. And being out west here with the deserts and stuff, there's just such a myth about all that stuff that I still find really alluring. And I used to listen to Art Bell when I was in my own observatory up on top of that peak and overlooking Latigo way up there. And, kind of creeped me out. Some of the stuff there's, alien abduction and all that kind of stuff. And so it's kind of a way to cross our cultural weirdness with the steady, sort of the slow pace of my work and the sky, basically. So, sort of blending things. But so that one I redrew the landscape to fit Matilaha Canyon there, and then introduced constellations and totally improved the globe. It's much better than it was.
It's so amazing. I was asking this because I was looking at what somebody was on, like, what is this talking about? And it's like, oh, Pecan Florey, or Pecan Florey, was like, oh. Yeah, I think it's all weird,
Yeah, yeah. Some of it comes through, but it's really
It's hard to do.
yeah. It's like a what do they call that? Pentameny or palimpsest? I don't know. What is it? Palimpsest, right? Yeah. If my art school memory serves me right. But anyway, so it's wonderful to live in a place where you can still see the Milky Way, in this valley on a summer night, no moon, a little later at night, you can see the Milky Way and some of the star clouds. And that's pretty rare these days, living so close to a megalopolis. So it's very fortunate the way the mountains are set up here. It blocks out the auto center and all that stuff. So anyway, I think that's it. Any more questions? Yeah, Piper.
Do you have any other upcoming projects that you have been commissioned for, or anything that's upcoming with any other type of astrophysics?
Not at the moment, no.
Country?
No. No, this year is last year was busy. I went to see I did a residency at University of Central Arkansas, of all places, during the total solar eclipse. And had a little show, taught a class, observed the eclipse, which was fabulous. It was crystal clear that day and dry. I thought it'd be all murky and rainy. Then that night it rained, but the whole day was dry, crystal clear. So I did that, but this year nothing's come up. So I think it's because we're all going through major changes globally. So that's. But I'm happy just to be able to develop work.
There's no more questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.